The end of things started with a leaf trapped in my son's eye. "Don't touch it," I said. "Not with your bare hands." Lena and I stood over our daughter in the kitchen, the overhead lights buzzing faintly above us. We tilted her face toward the brightness, and there it was, right at the corner of her right eye. A leaf. Small, delicate. A young birch leaf, paper-thin and pale green. One edge was folded in, caught under her lower lid. "How the hell?" Lena whispered. "How does a leaf end up there?" I didn't have an answer. There were birch trees on the property. That much was true. But none were close enough to shed a leaf indoors, let alone lodge one in a child's eye. And Ava? She wasn't the type to play rough. She was 9 years old, but spoke with the dry calm of someone who'd already read the obituary section twice before breakfast. I crouched in front of her. "Did you put this here, sweetheart?" I asked. "By accident." Ava shook her head, expressionless. "I don't remember anything." Lena hovered behind me, growing impatient. "Let me just take it out. It's barely in there." I stopped her again. My gut twisted in that specific, silent way it always does right before something goes terribly wrong. "I'll get the tweezers," I muttered. "Don't touch it. Please." She frowned at me. "It's just a leaf." But I was already moving. I tore through the drawer in the hallway bathroom, found the tweezers, and returned before Lena could do anything reckless. She reached for the tool. "I'll do it," she said. "No," I replied, clutching it tighter. "I've got steadier hands." Lena was about to argue, as always. But Ava spoke. "I want Dad to do it." Her voice was soft, steady, and very strange. There was no fear, no flinch, no tears. It was the way she said it, like she was done. Not panicked, not confused. Just accepting. Like she already knew something was wrong. Like she knew it didn't matter anymore. I knelt in front of her and brought the tweezers close. Lena held her breath as I gripped the edge of the leaf. Gently, carefully, I began to pull. It resisted, just a little, and then it slid free. Or so I thought, because after the leaf came a thin stem, and after that, a twig, and on that twig, moisture-drenched bits of new growth. Some of it reddish. Some of it. Was that blood? Lena gasped. "Stop," she said. "Stop, you're hurting her." But Ava just sat there, silent, still. There was no sign of pain on her face. No discomfort, just blank calm. I kept pulling. The stem lengthened. Segment after segment emerged from her eye, like it had been coiled inside her head. The twig was thin, but it branched. Tiny offshoots appeared. Damp leaves curled open. Lena's scream jolted me, but still, I couldn't stop. I stared at the growing thing like I was hypnotized. I wasn't even pulling anymore. It was coming out on its own, like a snake uncoiling itself, using my hand for guidance. "Jesus," I whispered. "And Ava?" She blinked once, then said softly, "It tickles a little." Lena ran to the drawer, came back with scissors. She cut the branch close to Ava's face. The rest of it, still attached to the base of the leaf, fell to the floor with a soft, wet slap. I dropped the tweezers, nearly vomited. Ava wiped her eye with her sleeve. "Is it done?" "No," I whispered. "We're going to the hospital." The drive was a blur. Ava stared out the window, completely at peace. Lena sat beside her in the back seat, gripping her hand like it was the only thing tethering them both to the earth. When we arrived at the emergency wing, no one made jokes. No eye rolls. No Dr. Google parents again. One look at the branch in the Ziploc bag Lena brought was enough. They brought us to a private wing. Immediately, we waited while they scanned her. Ran x-rays, MRIs. Every so often a nurse would peek in, pale-faced. Then came the doctor. A quiet man named Dr. Ellison. Bald, precise, careful. He looked tired already. "Can you tell us what's going on?" Lena asked. He sighed and motioned toward the light board on the wall, where he placed the films. And then we saw it. Inside Ava's skull, through the soft gray of her developing brain, there were roots. Roots and tiny branching tendrils. Not one, not two, hundreds. They curved through her sinuses, curled behind her eye sockets. Some of them wound toward her lungs, some into her spine. I stared. My breath stopped. "It didn't start in her eye?" I said. Dr. Ellison shook his head. "No, the growth is systemic. It's been developing for some time. That eye was just the first exit point." Lena stepped back like she'd been slapped. "How long?" she whispered. "How long has this thing been growing inside her?" Dr. Ellison didn't answer right away, because the scan said it all. There was no starting point. The root system was so tangled, so embedded into her. There was no clear place it began. It was part of her. Dr. Ellison pointed to the scan, tracing the white outlines that spiderwebbed through Ava's head and chest. This isn't a foreign object, he said. Not anymore. Whatever it is, it's integrated. It's living tissue now. Lena stood silently, arms wrapped around herself. I asked the question neither of us wanted answered. Is it killing her? Ellison hesitated. Then he nodded. Yes. Slowly. But surely. I felt the air leave my lungs. We stayed at the hospital for hours. They ran more tests. Asked more questions. We didn't have answers, just more fear. Lena kept pacing. Kept staring at Ava like she was trying to memorize her. Ava? She didn't cry. Didn't ask what was happening. She just sat quietly on the exam table, legs swinging, humming a soft, tuneless melody. Every so often she'd say something strange. Like, it doesn't feel scary. Just busy inside. Or, sometimes I think it dreams. We didn't know what to say to that. Later, in a private consult room, Dr. Ellison closed the door behind us. This won't be easy to hear, he said. But you deserve honesty. Lena nodded tightly. He turned the light back on behind the film scans. This plant, this organism, it's not just invasive. It's connected to everything vital. The spine, the heart, the lungs. I looked away. There's no clean way to remove it, he continued. Even if we tried, it would kill her before we made it halfway. Lena's voice cracked. So what are you saying? I'm saying we don't have a cure, he replied. Not here. Not yet. I clenched my jaw. Then what do you suggest? Dr. Ellison didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the door where Ava sat doodling in the hallway. She's calm, he said quietly. I've never seen a child that calm, especially after a diagnosis like this. There's something about her, she's adapting. Adapting, Lena repeated. You mean the plant is winning? No, he said. I mean, maybe she's not fighting it because it doesn't feel like an enemy. On the way home, Ava sat in the back seat humming again. We didn't speak for most of the drive. I think we were both afraid that if we spoke, we'd fall apart. But halfway through the drive, Ava leaned forward. I don't think it wants to hurt me, she said. I think it just wants to grow. When we got home, the first thing Lena did was lock the doors. All of them. Then she closed every curtain. I found her in the kitchen an hour later, sitting in the dark, scrolling through article after article on her phone. She didn't look up when she spoke. There are others. I froze. What? She turned the screen toward me. A headline. Unexplained growths in rural communities. Cases in Vermont and Oregon. Another. Botanical infection? Doctors baffled by leaf-like tumors. Another. The green plague. Dozens report sudden onset of internal plant matter. We fell into a kind of obsessive pattern after that. Watching the news nonstop. Joining forums. Digging into message boards. Everywhere. People were reporting the same thing. It started small. A petal in the ear. A thorn under the nail. A bloom in the mouth. It didn't always come from trees. Sometimes it was vines. Sometimes moss. Sometimes fungi. But always from within. And always spreading. Some of the infected raged. Destroyed their gardens. Burned their homes. Others accepted it. One thread chilled me. A woman wrote. He said it whispered to him. Said it didn't feel like dying. More like becoming something else. Something older. Lena read that line 5 times. And said nothing. A few days later, we found a man outside the clinic. At first, I thought he was drunk, slumped against the sidewalk with torn shoes and his coat pulled tight. But as we walked past, I saw it. Thorns. Dozens of them. Poking through his cheeks and lips. Roses, maybe. Petals wilted from his eyes like tears. Lena gasped. Ava just stared. The man turned slowly toward us. I froze. And then, in a voice thick and slurred, he said, "It spreads. Even through love." Then he reached toward Ava. Not fast. Not violent. Just reaching. Lena pulled her close, and we hurried away. That night, Ava's eye bled again. Tiny green threads peeked out from under her lower lid. We didn't sleep. We took turns watching her breathe. At 2 a.m., Lena whispered, "What if she becomes something else?" I didn't answer, because I was already thinking the same thing. The next morning, Ava asked, "When I turn into a tree, can you plant me in the backyard?" I froze mid-step. She said it so casually, like asking for pancakes. Lena went to her, knelt beside her bed. "You're not going to be a tree, sweetie," she said, holding back tears. Ava tilted her head. I think it would be nice. Trees live a long time. I walked out of the room. I couldn't take it. We kept things quiet. Didn't tell the neighbors. Didn't tell anyone. We didn't want Ava becoming some headline. But more cases appeared. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Governments were confused. Some blamed chemicals. Others blamed evolution. Others still called it punishment. No one could stop it. And no one could explain why the infected didn't feel pain. Why they didn't resist. Why so many of them were calm. I stared at Ava's face while she slept. At the leaf half folded over her eye. At the green vein threading beneath the skin of her temple. I thought about how plants grow toward the light. About how they wrap themselves around anything warm, anything still. And I realized, maybe we weren't being killed. Maybe we were being used. 3 weeks passed. And Ava was still walking. Still laughing. Still alive. If you didn't look too closely, she looked normal. Except for the leaf. The one that had grown back. It had a subtle shimmer now. Like dew was always on it. Sometimes it fluttered, even when there was no breeze. We kept her out of school. Out of public. We said it was a long illness. A blood issue. Nothing contagious. But that was a lie. Because deep down, we suspected it was contagious. We'd seen the signs. A spot on Lena's shoulder that wouldn't go away. A vine-like rash wrapping around my left calf. We didn't speak of it. Not yet. But we both knew. On the news, it was called the bloom. That was the name the anchors had landed on. It sounded innocent. Too innocent. But what it did, that wasn't innocent at all. At first it had been small stories. A man in Oregon with ferns in his lungs. A teenager in France whose skin had begun producing sap. A family in rural Argentina, entirely consumed. Only their clothes left behind. Then came the panic. Governments started issuing containment protocols. Farms were raided. Nurseries burned. Greenhouses locked down with padlocks and biohazard tape. Tree-cutting businesses exploded overnight. Forests were declared emotionally hazardous. And people started disappearing. One morning, I found Ava in the living room. She was humming to the maple leaves in the window. Her hand was pressed against the glass. And on the outside, the leaves had curled toward her palm, as if they were listening. Ava, I said softly. She didn't flinch, just turned, eyes wide. There was something behind them, something not quite hers. They know me now, she whispered. They know my name. Later that day, I found Lena in the bathroom. She had locked the door, but I heard her crying. When she came out, she didn't say anything, just showed me what she'd pulled from her shoulder blade. A bud, a living one. It had bloomed, then fallen off in her palm. She wrapped it in gauze and flushed it, then went to bed without a word. By week 5, we stopped pretending. The leaf in Ava's eye had doubled in size, and something else had started to grow. Small twigs now poked gently from her scalp. Not sharp, not grotesque, delicate, like antlers still in velvet. We were still hiding her, but the world wasn't hiding anymore. Online, people had divided into camps. There were the burners. Those who believed the only way to survive was to destroy anything green. They firebombed parks, slashed public gardens, even set fire to national forests. Then there were the keepers, people who believed the infected were becoming something higher. That the bloom was a gift, not a disease. Some of them went out into the woods and never came back. We started getting visits. At first, it was just neighbors, concerned, curious, asking about Ava. Then came the men in suits. They never said which agency. They asked if Ava had been exposed to any new substances, any experimental medication, unusual foods, fungal spores, pollen types. We lied. We lied about everything. They took notes anyway. Then one of them handed me a card. It had no name, just a symbol, a seed, drawn in black ink. The next night, I heard Ava whispering in her room. I thought maybe she was on her tablet, watching something. But when I opened the door, she was sitting cross-legged on her bed. In the dark, no devices, just talking to the air. I know, she said. I'm trying. But they're scared. Then she turned toward me. They think you're going to burn me. I stood frozen. She smiled faintly. But you won't, right? That week, Lena developed a fever. She shook in bed, drenched in sweat. I stayed by her side, brought cold cloths, watched the buds bloom again, this time from her wrist. She didn't fight it, didn't cry, just whispered. If she's becoming something new, then maybe I should too. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen one night and stared at my hands, fingers trembling. I felt something under the skin, something pulsing, something warm. And I thought about the man outside the clinic, the one with roses in his face. I thought about his words. It spreads, even through love. Then came the turning point. Ava disappeared. Not for long. Just an hour. But long enough. We found the back door wide open. Lena ran out into the yard screaming her name. And there, under the moonlight, half hidden in the shadows of the birch tree, was Ava, standing perfectly still. Back to us. Something wrapped around her legs. Not roots. Not branches. Grass. It had grown up from the ground, twisted around her ankles, holding her there. I ran forward and yanked her free, carried her inside, through the dead vines onto the porch. But when I looked down at my arms, the bark had spread, just a little, but enough to see. My veins were changing. Later that night, Ava sat up in bed and said, "It didn't want to scare you. It just needed to know if you'd still come for me." I didn't respond, because I didn't know the answer. I stopped calling it a leaf. It had grown too large, too structured, too intentional. By now, the green mass covering Ava's right eye was shaped like a curled petal, almost elegant. It blinked when she blinked, responded to light like it sensed the world. And it wasn't alone. From her scalp, new growth had begun to emerge. Thin stalks, barely thicker than hair at first. Then thicker, soft red buds on the ends. Ava didn't complain. She said it felt like her body had more to do, like it had a purpose now. Lena, meanwhile, was changing too. The fever hadn't come back. But her skin, I'd noticed subtle patterns. Leaf-shaped blotches on her back. Faint root lines wrapping her calves like vines beneath the skin. She covered them in long sleeves. But I saw her watching herself in the mirror longer than usual. Not scared. Not crying. Just waiting. One night, I caught her whispering to the tree outside Ava's window. I didn't interrupt. I just stood in the hallway, listening. She didn't speak English. Not exactly. Just low, rhythmic sounds. A hum. A murmur. And the tree. It shifted. Branches leaned closer to her, as if it understood. The next morning, I told her, "We need to leave." Lena turned, expression calm. Where would we go? Somewhere rural, where no one asks questions. We can't keep her here. She didn't answer, didn't argue. She just looked toward Ava's room and nodded. We packed the essentials, left the house at 4 a.m. No goodbyes, no notes. Drove west. Miles and miles of highway. Silence in the car. Ava curled in the back seat, watching the sky change color. She didn't ask where we were going, just said, "Thank you for coming with me." We found a place outside of Canyon Ridge. Old farmhouse. Abandoned but sturdy. Overgrown with weeds, which, ironically, felt safer. We didn't unpack much. Just blankets, food, water. Ava explored the woods behind the house. The trees there were different, older, and somehow less hostile. Lena watched her from the porch. Said, "I think they already know her." That evening, Ava came back with dirt on her hands and a daisy growing behind her ear. When Lena saw it, she didn't flinch. She smiled and said, "Beautiful." I didn't smile, because I'd noticed something new. The daisy wasn't just tucked behind her ear. It was connected. A thin stem ran under her skin, down into her neck. It pulsed. I checked my arm later that night. There were new lines there. Tiny veins branching out beneath the surface. They glowed faintly in the dark. For a moment, I almost convinced myself they were just blood vessels. Almost. The farmhouse gave us time. But not peace. The world outside was collapsing. We still had radio. News came in static-laced bursts. Entire regions burned. National parks shut down. Woodland neighborhoods evacuated. The infected, now simply called the greened, were hunted in some areas. Sanctified in others. People built shrines to them in secret. Others strung them up in public. The divide was widening. And one word kept surfacing. Transmission. No one knew how it spread. Air. Water. Touch. But one thing was clear. Everyone close to an infected person changed eventually. One morning, I woke up coughing petals. Tiny ones. Pale green. Lined with dew. They dropped from my mouth like they'd always belonged there. Lena held my shoulder. Didn't flinch. Just said, "It's starting." I nodded, because I'd known for days. But Ava was thriving. She walked differently now. Lighter. Like gravity had loosened its hold. She no longer flinched at cold or hunger. And when she stood among the trees, they shifted toward her. Leaves angled in her direction. Branches lowered, like bowing. It was no longer metaphorical. The forest knew her. And answered. Then came the knock. We hadn't heard a car. No tires. No footsteps. Just knock. 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 3 slow taps on the old wooden door. Lena stood frozen. I stepped forward, heart racing. Opened it slowly. A man stood there. Thin. Pale. Dressed in clean, dark clothes that didn't match the wilderness. And his eyes. They weren't right. Too wide. Too green. He smiled. Not kindly. "We've been watching," he said. "She's blooming beautifully." I didn't ask who he meant. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small sealed envelope, held it toward me. "I know you want to protect her. So do we. But it's time to choose." "What is this?" I asked. He didn't answer. He turned, walked back into the woods, and vanished. No sound. No trail. Just gone. Inside the envelope, a single word, handwritten on thick paper. Harvest. I showed it to Lena. She read it, took a deep breath, said, "They're not trying to kill her." "No." I asked. "No," she whispered. "They want her to lead." That night, Ava stood in the yard. The sky overhead glowed with lightning no storm had earned. She turned to us, her voice low, but clear. "They're coming soon. The ones that burn. They think I'm dangerous." "And are you?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just looked up, then said, "I don't want to be." The next morning, the woods were different. They weren't just still. They were watching. The wind didn't blow, but the trees swayed, slowly, deliberately. Their branches leaned toward the house like antennae tuning into a signal. And Ava? She wasn't sleeping anymore. She stood outside barefoot in the dew, her arms slightly lifted at her sides like she was waiting to take root. The petals behind her ears had opened fully. Her skin looked softer now, thinner, like it was being replaced. I told Lena we needed to go. She looked at me with a kind of gentle sadness, like she'd already let go. "There's nowhere else to run," she said. "But we don't have to give her up." "She's not ours anymore," Lena replied. "We just borrowed her." That afternoon, a black SUV rolled slowly up the gravel path. No sirens. No flags. No logos. 2 men stepped out. They weren't military, but they weren't normal, either. Their movements were too exact, too calm. One of them carried a metal case. The other had a single piece of paper. They didn't speak, just walked toward the tree line, where Ava stood, waiting. I stepped between them. "You can't take her." One of the men tilted his head, as if studying a broken clock. "She's already taken," he said. Lena joined me. "She's a child," she said. "She's still ours." "No," the man said. "She's what comes after children." Ava turned then, looked at us with eyes that were not quite hers anymore. "Dad," she said. "It's okay." "It's not," I whispered. "It's never going to be okay." Her face didn't change, but she took a step forward, and where her foot touched the ground, green spread outward. A living circle. The grass rose around her toes like it recognized her, like it belonged to her. The men opened the case. Inside, a small, pulsating mass. It looked like a seed, but wrong. Too alive. Too warm. They knelt, placed it into the earth, and Ava walked forward. She stood above it, hands open, and from her palms, roots spilled down. Thin, glowing threads weaving directly from her skin into the soil. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She smiled. Lena collapsed beside me, clutching my arm. But I couldn't move, because I saw it. The seed, it was fusing with her, with Ava, feeding off her, and feeding into her. The sky dimmed, but no clouds moved. Then the change accelerated. Vines curled from her arms. Branches pushed from her back. Her legs twisted, knees folding backward like bark hardening into angles. Leaves unfurled along her spine. Her mouth opened, and a chorus of voices spilled out. Not screams, not pain, just a sound like wind through 1,000 trees. Speaking in unison, calling. The men didn't react. They bowed their heads. Then they turned, walked away without another word. Lena and I stood there for hours, watching, until Ava no longer looked human, until she wasn't standing anymore. She was planted. The roots stretched 20 feet in every direction. Tendrils spiraled out and burrowed deep. The body that had once been our daughter was now a trunk, split with spirals, veined with green, still blooming. We went inside. Lena didn't speak for 3 days. The next week, I started coughing up bark. Thin chips of it, caught in my throat like splinters. I hid it from her, from myself. But I knew. Lena's skin began to flake. Petals peeled from her cheeks in her sleep. We didn't talk about it, because we both knew what it meant. We were changing. just like Ava. Then, one night, I woke up with something sharp in my back. I reached around and found a small shoot, growing right through me. I took the keys, drove into town, and found what I was looking for. A man with a plastic duffel, a pale scar running down his jaw. The kind of person you don't ask for a name. He handed me a vial, dark red, thick, stinking of chemicals and scorched metal. They say it kills the root, he whispered. But it kills something else, too. I took it anyway. Back home, Lena was asleep. I kissed her forehead, laid the second vial on the nightstand, and went out back, to the tree, to Ava. The branches above me didn't move, but I felt her watching, through the leaves, through the roots, through the part of her that still knew me. I'm sorry, I whispered. I held the needle over my arm, paused, then drove it in. The pain came fast, like fire, like knives twisting inside my lungs. I fell to my knees. My vision blurred. The vines inside me screamed. I screamed back. And then, everything went silent. When I woke up, it was morning. I was lying in the dirt, soaked in sweat. But the shoot was gone. The root inside me dead. I stumbled back into the house. Lena was sitting at the table. Still, silent. The vial unopened. I can't, she said. Her voice was quiet, cracked. She's still out there. She's still ours. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. The next day, I woke up alone. Lena's side of the bed was cold. I checked the kitchen, the living room. Nothing. Then I looked out the window. She was standing by the tree, her arms open, like she was waiting to be pulled back in. And the tree, our daughter, welcomed her. A branch lowered, wrapped around her waist, lifted her gently from the ground. Lena never looked back. Now it's just me. The last one. Still a father. Still a man. But only just. And I know what comes next. Because I hear them in the woods at night. Their roots shifting. Their voices growing louder. Calling out for the rest of us. And part of me wants to answer.